Through Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. If you don't mind, we'll begin live streaming and recording.
Yes, of course.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and I can confirm we've begun live streaming and recording. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, Council, residents. I see that we have indeed quorum, just barely. So I call to order this meeting, this public meeting under the Planning Act on this Wednesday, June 14th at 5:30 p.m. As usual at this time, to begin all meetings, we have a member of council read the land acknowledgement statement, and tonight that is myself. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. And next, we have the adoption of agenda, and I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda be amended to add item 5.2.1 to you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any?
No problem. It's just an amendment put forth by Councillor Olson to add the addendum item 5.2.1.
Okay. So any debate on the amendment? And not seeing any?
Excellent. For the vote, Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the agenda as amended. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda for the June 14th public meeting under the Planning Act special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. On the agenda as amended, any comments? Not seeing any?
Thank you. For the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item number 4, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I have so noted. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item number 5, being review and update of the Town of Pelham official plan, and I will now read some opening remarks into the record. Town of Pelham official plan conformity review and update. Section 26(3) of the Planning Act requires that before an official plan is updated, Council holds a special meeting of Council to discuss the revisions that may be required. This statutory public meeting fulfills the town's statutory obligation under Section 26(3) of the Planning Act. The town is in process of conducting an official plan review and update in accordance with the Planning Act. The process will result in the creation of a new official plan. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. This meeting will be the first of a series of public engagement sessions, and as the town develops a new official plan. No decisions are being made at this time, and staff are anticipating a draft version of the new official plan to be available in late 2023, early 2024 for public review and comment. It is important to note that this public meeting is the first of a series of public consultation opportunities throughout the official plan review and update process, and input from the community is crucial to understanding the needs and wants of residents. To you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our consultants here with us this evening that will be presenting the official plan review.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bender and Ms. Salis, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Junkin. My great pleasure to be here this evening, or late afternoon, early evening with you My name is Greg Bender, and I work for a firm called WSP. I also have with me this evening Andrea Saleze, who is also accompanying me on this particular project. Just to apologize, this is not how I normally talk, but thankfully Andrea is going to be doing the lion's share of the presentation, so you don't have to hear this sad voice through the whole presentation. I do want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you this today. It is a very important meeting and certainly serves as a kickoff to a very exciting process to certainly update your official plan. Just as of note, not that it has anything to do with the project, it is a special project for me because I actually grew up in Font Hill. So I've been very looking forward to this project, and I look forward to working with all of you and members of the public to complete this project with the town. Next slide, Andrea. So what we want to talk to you about during this presentation is why we're here as part of the statutory public meeting. Talk to you about who we are and who's part of the project team. And just for the context of members of the public who might not be aware, what is an official plan, why we're doing an official plan review, and some of the major influences for this particular project. What are the influences from changing provincial policy, which we all know changes on a daily basis, and sort of certain local key drivers that we know from being on the ground, but also certainly information we've received from staff. We're going to talk to you about sort of what the review and technical conformity review will look like, the supporting studies that will feed into this particular project, what our engagement programs look like and what we're recommending, the big sort of moves, the influences as part of this project, and the next steps for the duration of the project. So why we're here as part of the statutory public meeting, I know Madam Clerk read some important narrative to support this meeting. But this is a meeting under the Planning Act that requires the town to sort of kick off this particular process. There's a section in the Planning Act called Section 26, which is a section that sort of identifies the need for municipalities to review their official plans on an ongoing basis. Certainly through this particular process, it's important to have this meeting because we want to hear from members of council in terms of sort of the major influences or items that they would like considered through this particular process, but also members of the public to use this as an opportunity for additional consideration of what this process and this program should be taking into consideration in terms of how the official plan could be updated to take that into effect. And again, it is a requirement of the Planning Act to hold this meeting, and certainly provides that, again, formal kickoff to move into the additional processes. So in terms of the project team, I'll start with the town because that's more important than us. We're working very closely with Barb and Lindsay, who I'm sure you know very well on the planning team. And we're working with them and meeting with them on an ongoing basis to understand and making sure that we're maintaining our schedule and ensuring that we're capturing everything that we need to do as part of the various deliverables that we have or will be submitting. So we as WSP, we a very large multidisciplinary firm, but we also have one of the largest planning departments in the country. And we do official plan reviews, among other sort of planning studies throughout the province and country. And certainly, I've been retained by the town to prepare and sort of a technical conformity review to aid in the preparation of a new official plan. And as I mentioned, I'm Greg Bender, the project manager from WSP. We have Andrea, who's going to be delivering the majority of the presentation, so you don't have to listen to me. And we also have some other people supporting, including Will Lemond, who's a planner in our group as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, and she'll walk you through the balance of the presentation.
Thanks, Greg, and hello to everyone who's listening in today and to members of council. So those that are not familiar with an official plan and what it does and how it helps the town to grow, an official plan, it really is a blueprint for how a municipality is going to grow in the short, medium, and long term. It's a document that spans the horizon of about 30 years, but it's a high-level policy document, so it's not a zoning bylaw. And for the most part, it directs growth. So it speaks to things like land use, where certain types of land uses, what they will look like, where they will be. It speaks to infrastructure and things like community services. And it's a pretty broad document in terms of what it contains, and we'll be talking a little bit about what those thematic areas are that we've been looking at in more detail. An official plan includes schedules, so they are a visualization of the policies within the plan, and they do a number of things. They identify where various land uses are in the town, and they talk to a number of other things like active transportation, as an example, or where natural heritage resources might be and where they need to be protected. As I mentioned before, official plans are high-level policy documents, but they're implemented through other planning tools. So one such tool is the town zoning bylaw, which after an official plan is approved and adopted, a municipality they need to update their zoning bylaw to be in conformity with the direction and the policy updates in the plan. Official plans are also implemented through policy documents such as secondary plans or tertiary plans and design guidelines. So just a little fun fact about the Town of Pelham's official plan. It was adopted by Council back in 2012 and approved in 2014. So we talked a little bit about the purpose of the official plan review already, and just to provide a bit more information about why we're doing that now, why the town's undertaking that now. As you may know, there's been several changes that have occurred to the provincial planning framework in the last couple of years especially, but certainly since the town's OP was approved back in 2014. Niagara Region's official plan was also approved by the ministry recently in November of 2022. So a local municipality needs to conform with the upper tiers regional official plan within about a year of adoption. And so that timeline takes us to about 2023, or roughly within that time frame. So in terms of, specifically those provincial, regional, and local drivers or policy documents that we need to take a look at through this process and what the town needs to take a look at. Some of you may have heard of the Planning Act, and really the Planning Act is legislation that guides and provides the legal basis for a number of things and guides land use planning in the province of Ontario, but specifically as it relates to the official plan, it provides direction for when official plans need to be updated. There's also the provincial policy statement. So as we may already know, the PPS there's a draft consolidated PPS out there for discussion that consolidates the provincial policy statement and the growth plan. But really what that document does is set out provincial planning goals and objectives and specific direction in terms of how municipalities are to achieve those goals and direction. So although the list in bullets there on the screen is not exhaustive, some key components of the PPS, which is an acronym we planners like to use for the provincial policy statement, is really emphasizing planning for, so an emphasis on planning for intensification and transit supportive development, and this is in an effort to curb urban sprawl. And certainly that ties into the second bullet, which is preparing for the impacts of a changing climate. One way we can do that is to intensify and grow up as opposed to growing out. So other documents that we are taking a look at, in which we've already taken a look at through the background report, is the growth plan, which is a short form for a place to grow, growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And so there's some proposed changes to that document, and certainly in an effort to improve housing affordability. So some key components to the growth plan, which speak to the goals and objectives of the PPS, is directing growth to areas such as settlement areas, but focusing that growth within delineated built-up areas as an example, strategic growth areas, and certainly to areas that have existing or planned transit. So that's growth to help support that investment. The growth plan also speaks to supporting complete communities, and there's a variety of ways in which a municipality can do that. One way is to take a look and consider a variety of built forms, including multi-unit residential buildings. The Greenbelt Plan is another provincial plan, and in case people who are listening in have not heard of that document before, really this is a document that really seeks to protect the agricultural land base and natural heritage and hydrological features within lands within the Greater Toronto Hamilton area and parts of Niagara region. So there's three main components that apply to the town within the Greenbelt Plan, and that's the natural heritage system, the agricultural system, and the water resource system. And we'll be talking a little bit about that today and in more detail in the documents that we have produced and will be producing for the town as part of phase one. And then finally, there's the Niagara Escarpment Plan. So this document really provides additional and specific protections for the escarpment. And they go beyond the policies of the Growth Plan and the Greenbelt Plan, and it's in support of matters such as clean air, clean drinking water, recreational activities, and it responds to climate change. And there's three designations within the Niagara Escarpment Plan that apply to the town of Pelham. I mentioned before that part of this conformity exercise is not just looking at provincial policy documents and conforming, so aligning the town's policies with provincial policies, but also the newly approved regional OP. And key matters for consideration, which we're certainly looking at, is matters pertaining to climate change and helping the town to prepare for the impacts of a changing climate. And that's actually one of the big moves that we'll be talking about. Other matters that the town needs to focus on and make sure that they're planning for are the growth allocations and numbers related to development in terms of units and people. Other matters include watershed planning, protecting and enhancing the natural environment, and planning for aggregate resources. So the official plan review is contemplated to be a three-phase work program. We're currently in phase one, and this is the technical conformity review, and this is where we're here to help the town. The next phase, so the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the technical conformity review, but the next phase after this one is when the town rolls up its sleeves and starts to prepare the draft official plan. And finally, in phase three, which is towards the end of this year, early next year, is the finalization of the official plan. And we have a slide that speaks to engagement, but there are engagement opportunities that are contemplated in each of the three phases that you see there on the screen. So what are the components of the technical conformity review, and why are we here, Greg and I, to help Lindsay and Barb and the other team members of the town? Really, this is a really important component to phase one because ultimately the documents that we're producing will provide recommendations on changes that are required to bring the town's official plan into conformity with the provincial documents and the regional official plan that I spoke to before. There's also a bit of a discussion in a discussion paper that we'll talk about in a bit that go beyond just the conformity and consistency exercise that we're excited to talk to you about today. So our main deliverables as part of phase one include, and I alluded to this before, a background research report and a discussion paper. So the background research report took all the inputs from all those documents that we talked about before and did a bit of a SWOT analysis. We looked at some gaps in the official plan and highlighted some of those matters to be considered through the conformity and consistency exercise. The discussion paper, which we were super excited to work on, speaks to opportunities to enhance the official plan and go a little bit beyond the conformity and consistency exercise, and we actually provide some options and solutions for the town's consideration. It also builds on the background research that we prepared as part of that first deliverable, which was the background research report. So those are both completed, and we'll talk a little bit about the latter today. The next deliverable in the short term for us, working with Lindsay and Barb, is the technical conformity report. So that's going to be a document that provides a number of policy recommendations, both at a macro and micro level, for updating the official plan. It's going to summarize the findings based on and using the background research report discussion paper as a foundation and a jumping off point. So the technical conformity report will summarize everything in one document. And we will present that report to council sometime in the fall. And finally, there will be a conformity matrix which will highlight the policy changes that I alluded to before. So the town has certainly been very busy, and this isn't the only work that they've been doing that will support and inform the official plan review and updated policies. The town, as you can see, there's quite a list on the screen. They've completed, have completed a number of studies, and there will be recommendations in some of these, if not all of them, that will help to inform the update to the official plan that we will consider, and the town will consider in the next phase. So as I mentioned before in the work program, each of the phases include touch points with various members of the public, including council. And what does that engagement program look like? Well, first and foremost, I'd like to take a step back and say, we know that engagement really is a critical component of the study process, and certainly in phase 1, but through the entire study program. So the town has put together a multi-pronged strategy to consult with key members of, with the public, but also with stakeholders, agencies, and town departments. So this is the first and only opportunity to provide input. There's going to be other opportunities planned through all 3 phases. So this is just the beginning, as Greg mentioned before, of the official plan review process. So what has been completed from an engagement perspective, what is ongoing, and what is planned in the future? The town has launched a great landing page with lots of information, and it's officially launched. You can access it now. The URL is there on the screen, or you can Google Engaging Pelham or Town of Pelham Official Plan Review, and you can find it, and there's lots of information there. The town has also started to engage with key agencies, the 3 key agencies, and Greg and I will be involved in some of those discussions. And Lindsay and Barb have already started to talk to members of the public, and they are available for discussions if people want to reach out. In terms of kind of short-term planned engagement events, we're going to talk at a very high level about the discussion paper today, but Greg and I will be working with the town to prepare a presentation with a bit more information on the highlights from that discussion paper, which will be pre-recorded and posted online on the project webpage. There will be more engagement opportunities and consultation events with other interested groups, including committee groups and advisory committees. Like I said before, we're going to be presenting the findings from the technical conformity report, and we'll be back to speak to you in the near future. And finally, there will be public open house events to engage members of the public with and put them in touch with policy planning staff. So we have essentially distilled our thoughts about the update to the official plan into 3 big moves, essentially. These are essentially 3 categories or thematic areas that most of our discussion is framed around. And those include supporting sustainable growth in complete communities, enhancing the town's agricultural system, and promoting a sustainable and climate resilient community. And really all 3 of these big moves include options for implementation for the town's consideration in the next couple of phases. So starting with supporting sustainable growth in complete communities, what does this mean? Really, it all ties back to what I mentioned before from a provincial policy perspective in the PPS down to the growth plan is really focusing on achieving and accommodating the growth that's anticipated in the next 30 years through intensification of existing urban areas and relying on that more so than greenfield development where possible. And concentrating that population and employment growth, because people like to focus on the residential component and sometimes forget about it, that there's also employment growth that's anticipated in the town, but concentrating that growth in the town's urban settlements of Fonthill and Fenwick, with the economic growth, with some economic growth in the agricultural sector. And we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. So while this is not an exhaustive list of all the options that we presented in the discussion paper, we thought we'd highlight a few. And so really, how can we achieve bullet number one? One way to intensify an existing urban area is to expand the number of housing options, looking at a variety of built form that's appropriate for the town, and really focusing on policies which support residential intensification. And there's quite a bit of a discussion in the discussion paper about how to achieve design excellence in public and private spaces. So as the town intensifies and maybe focuses a bit more on infill development, making sure that it's done in a way that is sensitive to the existing context. The second big move highlighted in the discussion paper, enhancing our agricultural system, really focuses on recognizing the town and the region's rich agricultural history. So what does this particular thematic area highlight? Well, really it's, how can the official plan support the preservation and maintenance of the town's existing agricultural assets? How can it diversify those uses in agricultural and rural areas? And in terms of some of the options presented in the discussion paper, it really does focus on ways in which the town can build on its existing policy framework to continue to protect and enhance the agricultural land base, and also it speaks to the agricultural food, the agri-food network. There's also a bit of a discussion around mineral aggregate resources. Finally, the third big move is about promoting a climate resilient community in the town. And so the discussion paper recognizes that the future of livability in the town really depends on promoting a healthy natural and built environment, and one that is sustainable and climate resilient. It provides a few options in which the official plan can maybe be reframed a little bit to apply a climate lens to its policies, or maybe even have a standalone climate and sustainability chapter. And really this builds upon the provincial planning framework that speaks to planning for a changing climate and ways in which the town can do that. So given the changes to the provincial planning framework since the last update to the official plan, really the discussion paper speaks to really emphasizing just preparing for the variability of a changing climate, and focusing on being proactive rather than reactive to those impacts, and other ways in which the natural environment can be protected and enhanced through policy and matters such as updates to the official plan's mapping. So in terms of next steps, we talked about the pre-recorded presentations, so that's something to look forward to. We are actively working on preparing the technical conformity review report, which will include recommendations and conformity matrix. And we will be presenting, as I mentioned before, the technical conformity review report to council sometime in the fall, I believe. And I guess for those that are listening in, we encourage you to visit the project webpage and sign up. I believe there's a form or a way in which you can just input your email address, and that way you can stay up to date with engagement events as an example, or updates to the project webpage with information such as the presentation from today's meeting. And Greg, that's it for me.
Thanks very much, Andrea. So now I'm happy to turn this back over to council.
Thank you both for a great presentation and outlining the process that will be followed. Before I go to the next step, I would like to ask the Director of Planning if Ms. Weens, any additional comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I think both Greg and Andrea did give a very thorough presentation about kind of the process and what we're embarking on here in terms of the official plan review and update. We are very early on in the process, so there haven't been new policies crafted yet, but we are working towards that. And as indicated, this is the first of, kind of public engagement sessions that we want to hold as we go through the process. Obviously, preparing the official plan there's a lot of interest in it. We have to ensure that we conform with provincial plans and policies. There are external agencies that will have an interest in the official plan and will provide comment to as, certainly the public and community groups, town advisory committees, and council. So we certainly intend to have a very broad spectrum of public consultation and input in this whole process. And this is, this is the first step, but it won't be the last step. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. The provincial government is going to make the process even more interesting, perhaps.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, there is always that looming threat of what's going to come down the pipe. We do know that the provincial government is in the process of, developing a new provincial planning statement and potentially doing away with the Green Growth Plan. So that is something that we're very aware of, and as we work through the process, we'll have to keep that in mind and be very mindful of that. That being said, the official plan is 10 years old. We need to get on with it, and so we're starting this piece now. But yes, there's always changes afoot. And certainly in the last, 3-4 years, there's been a lot of changes made to planning policies. Hopefully we're coming close to the end of those at the provincial level.
I turn to the clerk.
Thanks. Bring us to the public portion of today's meeting. Before I proceed, I do just want to mention that we will be accepting emails during the public portion from our live streaming participants. The email address is clerks@pelham.ca. Should we receive any emails, I will read them into the record today. As well, planning staff will be accepting written correspondence beyond today's session, so if you have any additional comments, please feel free to reach out to our planners. Mr. Mayor, we do not have any pre-registered members of the public this evening. However, you do have a full gallery, so you may wish to turn it over to the in-person gallery.
Okay, thank you. Is there any residents who would love to approach the podium and let give council your thoughts?
For anyone wishing to speak, we do have a microphone at the center podium. If you could just press the on button, it will turn red, and that means the microphone is active. If you're interested in speaking, please do attend and state your name for the record. Sorry, it'll turn red. Just give it a hard press. Excellent.
We're on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town of Pelham councillors, for the opportunity to address you today. I'm Graham Pett, a board member of PATH, Pelham Advocates for Trees and Habitat, and I'm here to speak to you today on PATH's behalf. In attendance, we also have Lois Lacroix, who is a board member with our group as well. We're at the beginning of what will likely be an extended journey with the official planning process, so I'll try to keep my remarks fairly brief. We certainly do look forward to being well engaged in this process, and at a future point, we will have written submissions, I'm sure, to provide in this regard. We want to state that over the last number of years, we've established some good relationships with Council and Town of Pelham staff. We maintain positive dialogue with staff and have been working cooperatively with them on projects such as jointly applying for various grants, such as for tree planting. We were heartened to work with them in terms of developing a more proactive tree maintenance program as well, and as for the completion of a tree canopy study as well. So these were all positive developments. However, over the past little while, we find the relationship hasn't been as rosy as we hoped it might be. We felt that the new zoning bylaw could have served as an excellent venue for putting forth some new initiatives, but none of our ideas were taken up. Our feedback was we were told to wait for another forum. In Council's most recent strategic planning exercise, well, a few of our suggestions made it to Council's plan. Many of them certainly did not. So now we find ourselves in the official planning forum. While all three big moves are important ones, and our primary focus is on climate resilience and sustainable community, without getting into the weeds too much at this stage, past big concerns revolve around the health and sustainability of our tree canopy. Rather than hoping that new tree planting will be the big answer, we need to stop cutting the mature, healthy trees which our community currently sustains for us. And this particularly applies to development. We feel we need better development, low-impact development, stormwater management practices improved, tree-saving plans, tree inventories, more new trees, and new trees planted properly in development. So wasteful to see 2, 3, 4-year-old trees in new developments that are dead and dying. We heard last night in the city of Burlington, even in their parks, they're losing 80% of their trees within 5 years. And this is the city of Burlington itself. So it shows the challenges, not just in terms of poor planting, but in terms of coping, obviously, with the changing climate. We want to see naturalized parks and parks developed, not cash taken in lieu of. Preservation of wetlands and woodlands, and a commitment to stand up for these, whether it's in the face of from developers or other levels of government. Certainly greener building standards and serious exploration of energy usage in the municipality and a community-wide emissions reduction program are all important factors. And finally, prioritizing the 12 Mile Creek for safeguarding and restoration, which we know the council has been taking some initiative. Glad to see that, but certainly hopefully incorporating that in better into the future development. Finally, a recognition by all that the Greenbelt isn't a scam, a commitment that the only development on the Greenbelt will be development that is allowed by the Greenbelt Act. And so our hope and our plea here today is to please proactively engage with us and with all citizens of Pelham who desire the opportunity to exercise their franchise in a participatory democracy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Pitt. We look forward to continuing our dialogue in the future, as you mentioned we have in the past. Thank you for that. Any other residents wishing to speak? Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and to staff and the consultant. My name's Craig Larmer. I'm a registered professional planner. I have approximately 30 or so years experience in and around Niagara in planning. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on the official plan review. I really appreciate the work that staff have done and the consultants have done on putting together the background report and the discussion paper to guide your deliberations. They've done a great job of explaining the need to be consistent with provincial policy, maintaining conformity with the provincial plans. I'm before you this evening representing the interests of the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Group as they relate to the good general agricultural and specialty agricultural policies affecting greenhouses and hoop houses. Now, I understand that this has been a high-level conversation so far, and that this is a very specific concern of the group. It relates to the policies that govern lot coverage for greenhouses and hoop houses. As you're likely aware, the official plan policies impose restrictions on the size and intensity of these operations, requiring a zoning bylaw amendment for any operation that is larger than 30% covering 30% of the lot. These policies have been in place since the official plan was approved in 2014. However, they didn't come forward or weren't really brought to light and weren't implemented until the new zoning bylaw came into effect on April 3rd of this year. So prior to that, the greenhouse lot coverage for greenhouses was 60%. The new zoning bylaw imposed the official plan policy at 30%. So a zoning bylaw amendment is required for anything more than 30% right now. So some may be tempted to say, what's the big deal with restricting lot coverage to 30%? If the grower wants to increase the size of their operation, just apply for a zoning bylaw amendment. No big deal. Before I get into the impact on the growers specifically, and their specific request to be considered in the review of the official plan, I'd like to take a small amount of, so forgive me if I'm taking too much liberty. That is not the intent. And as I said, the correspondence will be very clear about it. So the provincial policy statement states, in prime agricultural areas, all types, sizes, and intensities of agricultural uses and normal farm practices shall be promoted and protected in accordance with the provincial standards. That's the only direct quote I'm going to provide. The Greenbelt Plan echoes that for both the specialty crop areas and the prime agricultural areas. The Niagara Regional Official Plan, as the consultant noted, has recently been amended. It also has the same types, sizes, and intensities, all to be promoted, all to be protected. Same wording. And then there's the Farming and Food Production Protection Act. I think most of you are familiar with that. It has a number of preamble statements, including the conservation, protection, and encouragement and development of improvement of agricultural lands for the production of food and horticultural crops. Agricultural activities may this is one thing that I just want to draw specific attention to. Agricultural activities may include intensive operations that may cause discomfort and inconvenience to those on adjacent lands. Basically, the provincial mandate here through the Farming and Food Production Protection Act is that primary focus needs to be on agricultural lands and their production. All types, sizes, and intensities of operations are to be permitted and promoted. And then in terms of that addition of agricultural operation includes specifically the production of agricultural crops, greenhouse crops, maple syrup, mushrooms, nursery stock, on and on. So there's specific recognition to this sizes, intensities, types, does include greenhouse specifically. So while the direction of the province is clear, the town's current official plan policies severely restrict the size and intensity of an agricultural use that is a normal farm operation, and it consequently frustrates the development and improvement of agricultural lands for greenhouse operations. As the consultant noted, the official plan is intended to be a high-level policy document. So, in my opinion, it's odd that one type of agricultural operation is subject to such a specific provision or policy. To me, it's, you know, there are setback provisions that protect adjacent uses from the effects of a greenhouse operation. Usually it's 20 to 25 meters, depending on the use of ventilation fans in the sidewalls. That severely restricts the size of an operation. Generally, with a rectangular parcel would usually bring it down to a maximum of 70%. So the difference between the 70% that would be permitted outside of the setbacks and the 30% is extreme. 40% of the lands are essentially unusable for greenhouse operations. Now the discussion paper, which is the final discussion paper produced by the consultant, great document. It doesn't directly address this issue. It lends support to adopting a policy framework that enhances production and protection of agricultural lands. One of the big moves that they identify specifically is enhancing our agricultural system. In section 2.2, they recognize that the greenhouse industry is a key economic asset and important component of the town's character. So that's in there, that's fully recognized. The document goes on to address the province's agricultural guidelines, agricultural guidelines for land use. There's a number of bullet points in there. There's three that I'd like to read to you specifically. Improved viability of agriculture and growth of the agri-food sector. Better protection of the agricultural land base, and increased land use planning consistency and certainty across municipalities. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's a really important point, is what are the adjacent municipalities doing? Are these provisions similar or not? The paper goes on to identify Norfolk County's official plan as a best practice for a few reasons, including supporting the right to farm principle in the rural areas of the county. Now, right to farm is typically used to describe, and the Ontario Federation of Agriculture uses that term to define the Farming and Food Production and Protection Act, which, again, I say, supports all types, sizes, and intensities of normal farm operations. Norfolk County's official plan doesn't address greenhouses specifically. It's just an agricultural use. It's generally supported in all agricultural areas. Okay, so on page 20 of the discussion paper, there is an option, and it says enhance protections for agricultural lands and right to farm through clearer policies around minimum distance separation and requiring agricultural impacts assessments for certain non-agricultural uses in rural areas. So it's very specific on what right to farm is, and it only addresses minimum distance separation. So the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Group's request is that elimination of current policies affecting greenhouses and hoop houses be added to that list for the consideration of future reports. Again, this will all be in writing, so staff and consultants have it. So I want to go back to what's the big deal? Like, how are the greenhouse growers really affected? Like, is this a big deal, requiring a zoning amendment for lot coverage? So, in my opinion, the current official plan ignores that greenhouses and hoop houses are normal operations in terms of tradition and by definition by the province, the region, and the municipality itself. The provincial policy statement, the Greenbelt Plan, agricultural guidelines, and the regional official plan promote agricultural operations of all sizes and intensities. I know I'm beating that horse, but I'm just wanting to be clear. A zoning bylaw amendment is a costly venture in terms of money and time for greenhouse growers. A public consultation process for a use that is permitted and for which there is no basis for regulating in this manner. That's my opinion. And policy implies that the rationale for regulating lot coverage, and this is from the wording in the official plan, the purpose for regulating lot coverage is in the interest of ensuring compatibility with the agricultural area. That's the purpose of the setbacks. I don't see that that's a provision or policy requirement for lot coverage. If you're worried about impact, it's generally how close are you to me? How's the stormwater management? That's addressed through site plan, not through a zoning bylaw amendment. Lighting, the municipality's addressing that through municipal bylaw. So there's no real rationale for, in my opinion, for the need for a zoning bylaw amendment. As I mentioned, the Farming and Food Production and Protection Act gives preference to agricultural operations, recognizing that intensive operations may cause discomfort and inconveniences to adjacent uses. The official plan does not impose lot coverage restrictions for any other agricultural crop. It does for animal operations, but not for crops. Now back to what I had said about consistency between municipalities. There's an uneven playing field here. Adjacent municipalities, West Lincoln caps 70%, their lot coverage is 70%. So you could have a greenhouse grower on one side of Victoria Avenue, restricted to 30% in Pelham, permitted 70% in West Lincoln. So nothing separating them but 66 feet. Neither Lincoln nor St. Catharines impose restrictions at all. The only other municipality that imposes a restriction is Thorold. It's 30%. If you look at Thorold's official plan and Pelham's official plan, it's an exact copy. Same consultant did the Pelham's plan and Thorold's plan. I'm not sure of the basis for the 30%, but that's the reality. And on the topic of uneven playing field, there's also an uneven playing field within Pelham. The greenhouse growers are subjected to a different let me start it again. Within Pelham, restricting the use of lands to 30% forces greenhouse growers to compete with farmers that are able to use the whole of their property for their agricultural crop. So somebody's growing corn, somebody's growing berries, whatever. They can permit, they're using all of their property, and sometimes they're using municipal road allowance as well. So that places them at an economic disadvantage when they're trying to purchase lands because they can only use 30%. So back to the request is that, that the elimination of current policies affecting greenhouses and hoop houses, the lot coverage restrictions be removed. That is the request. Now, one more thing that I need to make note of, as Ms. Weens noted, we're very early on in the process. I think that the report says that a draft of the official plan may come forward in late 2023, early 2024. That's just for public comment. There's probably likely another round of public comment and agency comments, and then it has to go to the region for approval. It's going to be some time before this is addressed. And so keeping that in mind and recognizing that this is going to be lengthy, the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Group may have to address the matter through the Normal Farm Practices Board. Now, we're just bringing that up so that you're aware, and we're hoping that if the council is favorable in this request, that you'd also work cooperatively with the group in approaching the Niagara Farm Practices Board so that we can resolve the matter in an amicable way, one that satisfies the needs of the towns, promoting agriculture, and one that satisfies the needs of the greenhouse growers as well. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
There we go. Thanks, Craig, for that perhaps too detailed, perhaps, for this evening, but fine. It's a discussion, and we welcome it. Thank you. Is it? Pardon me? Oh, before that, can we ask?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could kindly request a 5-minute break just for our IT, they would like to restart our system quickly, if you don't mind.
Okay, so we're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we'll pick this up. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Hello, hello. Sure, I'll just make some comments. So Craig, thanks so much for your presentation. It is preliminary. This entire review is preliminary, and the same thing to Mr. Pett's comments. They're all taken under consideration, and we're starting this journey all over again since 2014. And weren't you an employee at 2014? Okay, sorry, Craig. Okay, sorry about that, Craig.
But being started on.
Yeah, but it was being started on. Yeah, but no, just kidding aside.
It is.
Your points are well taken. It is preliminary process. It will take a while. Whether there's ways through the agricultural committee
With
or
staff and whatever, that we can look at this prior to that long process being completed. I think we should be open to that. I like the fact that we are looking at agricultural initiatives.
I like the fact
diligently
in
and
the
hard
big move
because
that we are looking
we're
at
a rural
agricultural
community and to protect
initiatives
our agriculture
very diligently and hard.
protect but enhance. And taking your into consideration, we would be enhancing the agricultural areas in our
Yes.
town. So again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I think there's a way to move forward cooperatively. And it sounds like the council, at least the four of you that are here, are looking for something like that. So yeah, the group is interested in the conversation. So thank you.
So thanks, Greg. I know that Niagara recently had a Niagara Week up in Toronto. The open house there. I had a couple of big operators outside of Pelham come to me specifically, and that Pelham was somewhat behind with that restriction. And of course, with the price of land, especially in Pelham, and especially in Niagara, it does seem that you buy 10 acres and you only can use 3 acres. That doesn't seem. So hopefully, we will behind that with that restriction. And of course, with the price of land, especially in Pelham, especially in Niagara, it does seem unfair that you buy 10 acres and you only can use 3 acres. Any other comments or any other residents? We will work through that and resolve that issue substantially.
If you wouldn't mind, actually, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I
Okay,
am Jason
none?
Wieringa, and,
Thank you for your
recognizing
presentation.
this is kind of high level, but also
Thank you.
recognizing.
Any other
consultation
comments
is
or
requested.
any other residents that
I'm here
would like
to
to
follow up with Greg
to speak?
about greenhouses and the 30% that we see.
Thank you, sir.
So I operate a farm outside of North, members of my family.
If you wouldn't mind actually turning on the microphone, thank you.
Operators.
You're on.
We have a 14-acre farm.
I am Jason
with
Wieringa,
83,000 square feet.
And
of
yeah,
greenhouses.
recognizing this is kind of
We
high
use
level,
these greenhouses
but also
year-round
recognizing
for the production of
that
potted ornamental
public
plants.
consultation is
However,
requested.
Greenhouses
I'm
can
here
be
to
used
talk
for many
about,
things.
follow up with Greg
And
about
if
greenhouses
the opportunity arises,
and the
we
30% issue
grow
that
the
we
crops.
see.
We could grow berries. we could
So
grow fruits,
I operate a
vegetables.
farm outside of
The
North
greenhouse is quite
Pelham with
flexible in
members
its
of my
ability.
family. My cousin family and I are
This is my
third-generation
third
operators.
time being involved.
We have
with,
14-acre
town council,
farm
and it's
with
not my favorite thing to do.
83,000 square feet of greenhouses.
The first time was
We use these
providing
greenhouses
public
year-round for the
input
production
on
of
a meeting
potted
focused on
ornamental
cannabis
plants.
regulations.
However,
At that time,
greenhouses can be
I
used for many
reminded
things.
council that there are
And
many greenhouses
if
in
the
Pelham,
opportunity arises, we
and not all of them
could
are
do other
cannabis
crops. We
producers.
could grow berries, we could grow
I
fruits, vegetables.
advised,
A greenhouse
and my
is quite
comments
flexible in its
stated
ability.
something to the effect of hastily made regulations
This is my
to
third
target
time being
greenhouse
involved
cannabis
with
producers
town council,
could be a
and
hindrance
it's not
to
my favorite thing to do.
non-cannabis operations. And there could be unintended consequences to operators like myself. I got my pages out of order.
You should always number your pages.
Yes. My second involvement with the town council was when we applied for a site plan we had desire to expand our greenhouse operation. As our third generation took over from the second, we needed to expand to make room for more people and more salaries, let's say. So currently our lot coverage is 17% and our site plan is 30. And at that time, we were approved. And thank you, Mayor Junkin, for your remarks and your congratulations at that time. It's important that we continue to have opportunities for expansion on our current property. So although we do have the site plan is not full. We have space north of the area of our site plan that could, if the opportunity arises, be used for more greenhouses. At this time, in the current regulations, it's unable to be used for greenhouses. Right now, we have this land in a rotation of agronomic crops, corn, wheat, soy. It's important that we continue to have and make a decent living on a small operation like my grandparents had. That is not an economic reality of today. Our segment of the industry is no different than other agricultural segments who see the advantages of scale. International, domestic, and local competition are always present. It makes no sense to be forced to have to buy another plot of land to expand our greenhouses when we reach that point of 30%. Even if our neighbor would sell us his land, 2 separate greenhouses would be wildly inefficient use of capital. The ongoing operational costs, input, and logistical efficiency would be well below the advantages realized in a single consolidated production facility. This is even more important, and we feel another it plot recently of in the land past few to years where expand input our costs greenhouses have been when we rising reach at that disturbing point of rates. 30%. I pulled this out of
Even
StatsCan
if
yesterday.
our neighbor would sell us his
2000 and
land,
2000
2
2020,
separate greenhouses
2021,
would be
greenhouse
wildly
expenses have
inefficient
risen
use of capital.
9%.
The ongoing
both years,
operational costs,
and this
input,
rise
and
is
logistical
32%
efficiency would be
above
well
the
below
average
the
rise.
advantages realized in a single.
When a municipality limits our ability to make the best use of available land, it impacts the long-term viability of the farm operation. This is important to consider when thinking about generational farm succession. Farms, and especially greenhouses, require a very high level of capital investment. If our next generation is limited, there's a high likelihood they will not take over the family farm and could lead to the eventual demise of the operation. If generational succession of the farm is not desired, it's still important to us to be able to maximize the price of the farmland when it goes for sale. So I'm not putting pressure on my kids to be a farmer like me. If they choose that, that's up to them. Land with greenhouses that are not restricted are much more attractive to potential buyers. Part of the attractiveness is the foreseeable possibility of retirement. We need to make farming of all types attractive career and lifestyle option to ensure that farming in Pelham continues to enrich the community and provide a stable base for the local economy. Every business wants to have the option to grow and expand. Greenhouse operations are no different, and as it stands now at 30% lot coverage, we see this could be a major hindrance. If you would like to talk more about greenhouses, I'd be happy to speak with you now or in the future. Thanks.
Turn my mic on. You number your pages, I'll turn my mic on. Any comments? Council Olson.
Yes, thank you very much for that, putting that in the language that I really understand as an agriculturalist myself. And you know, you've got to be able to compete on the level playing field, or you will eventually disappear. And anything that we're doing to hold you back is probably not going to be a productive thing. And the fact that I think the numbers are like the next 10 years, 50% of farms will be change hands or
generational.
Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. The average age of a farmer is well above me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I appreciate your comments and about that. That's very understandable, and in being in competitive businesses myself in the past, you know, once you lose it, it's very hard to get it back. That competitive edge and maybe, I think probably maybe your advantage is the entrepreneurial nature of our farmers in Pelham, because they certainly are a lot of success stories here, and they've led the way out of the pandemic, and I'd like to see us continue to support it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Not seeing any. Again, thank you for your presentation. Once again, we turn to the assembled residents. Any other comments to be made? Not seeing any. Once, twice, 3 times. Too bad. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Councilors. Bill Heska, I'm a resident of Pelham for over 40 years, and these guys talking about agriculture, I worked in the agriculture industry for 40 years in manufacturing, and in my time, I saw a lot of changes, and today, when I started in the industry, there was about 15 manufacturers in Canada. Right now, there's 0. And agriculture, I read the Country Guide regularly, and it's shocking to see the challenges the farmers are going through and the costs. And it's not only around here, it's out west and not in Western Canada. So I support the agricultural industry and what we can do to support them. And I know I've been talking to John and Louis about this, and they are very, I think, they're concerned and they're frustrated, and we need to go and be responsible for agriculture in our community. But one of the questions, in terms of planning, my concern is the cost. Right now, I know the government's putting the screws down to make all these changes, but we have 12 municipalities in Niagara, 12 councils. Is every planning department doing their own thing in terms of upgrading official plans and that? Can there not be any sharing of resources in terms of to reduce costs? Because I know it's not going to happen. It's not going to be a low-cost event. I was on the cannabis committee, and we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get consultants to support us. I feel that there needs to be a rationalization in terms of what needs to be done because of the limited time frame, limited resources to go and get the planning picture or planning policy revised and make it based on today's direction from the provincial government. So that's my comment.
Any other residents? Oh, wait, before we move on, Ms. Williams,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I can certainly advise that we are working on agreements with the region and local municipalities to share planning services. So that is something that is in the works as we speak, and there will be more of that coming forward to council in the near future.
any other comments or any other residents would like to make comments to council at this time? Obviously, as the process unfolds, written documentation will be accepted, and it will indeed be a transparent process going forward. Not seeing anyone, I turn to the clerk. And here I am. Well, I had a great time. I had a great conversation to myself up there. I turned to the clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It is 6:44 p.m. and we have not received any emails from the live streaming public. You may turn to the committee for input.
Okay, thank you. Any committee members have comments? And I'll start with Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to ask, I have 3 issues that I would like to see addressed, and one is the urban boundaries, which we established, and I would like to see some kind of building codes built into our permit plans, and the building codes would be such things as solar power ready, the types of things that we've talked about, low-impact development features, which we have plenty of, and those are the things I would recommend. But I really want to talk about our aging population, because it's a fact that for one of the effects is that males are going to outlive their driving privileges by 6 years, and females by 8 or 9 years. Those are facts, and we have to have some kind of a plan for transit. And we also have to have some kind of an overriding plan for aging. And I want to suggest that the Niagara, I think it's the Niagara Aging Strategy, which came out, I think it was 1915 or 2015 and 2014 or something, is about 10 years ahead of its time, because it was actually adopted by the World Health Organization just last year as an example of a proper plan for aging. So those would be a couple of suggestions that I would make, as well as I guess I'll leave it at that. Barb, if I could, perhaps a comment.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that? Ms. Weems?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you for those comments. The urban boundaries are established by the region, and so when the region they did allow for some expansion to the urban boundary in Fonthill. So that is now fixed, and the urban boundary for Fenwick is also fixed. And so through this process, we would not be looking to expand the urban boundary. That's not what the official plan will do. But we will develop policies in terms of, those new expanded areas and how they what the future land uses should be for those areas, and then they would be subject to secondary plan process. With regards to issues like the low impact development standards and those kind of things, those are certainly elements in terms of a policy direction that we can put into the official plan to include and make that, certainly a requirement for development. I can also advise that our Public Works Department is looking at our engineering design standards, and through that process, they will be looking at introducing requirements for low impact development standards, particularly as it relates to stormwater management in the engineering design standards. So that's really the place for that. Certainly the comments around the aging population and the Niagara Aging Strategy, having, again, policies that support communities and place, and to provide for a variety of housing choices for people as they move through their life cycle, and from family living to empty nesters to being retired to needing the full range of housing through our life processes is certainly important, and that would be certainly something that we would be looking at in the policy context. And certainly providing, appropriate development that supports transit, and can affect a broader transit usage in the community is important. So again, we'll be looking at policies that support transit supportive development and those kind of things. So those are all very good comments, and those are things that we'll be looking at as we develop policies for the official plan. So yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. The urban boundaries was a critical thing, a critical part of the climate adjustment plans that we had to make, and it was also important part of the agricultural plans that we had. So I'm pleased to see that we've got them fixed, and that was in the last council, that was a pretty important thing that we achieved. And I just want to mention that some people shouldn't be driving at a certain age, Mr. Mayor, so just want to mention that too.
I will take that under consideration. Any other comments, members of the committee? Council Nesnick.
Thank you. So through you, yes, Mr. Mayor, I guess just a comment that I would like to make sure stays in our official plan is that preservation of natural spaces within the community. We are not an industrial community by any means. We will never be an industrial community. We are a town and agricultural. So those are the big keepers in, I guess, our big official plan. So that will be what I'll be looking for when it is presented to us, to make sure that those policies are in place to maintain our trees and our parks and our natural spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Turn now to Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate the 4 individuals that stood up and provided input at tonight's meeting. I think it's really important that those people who are very interested in the official plan and the direction that our town is going to take going forward should provide comment to staff and stay engaged in this process. Again, it's a long process, but the input from thing is for council, if we don't hear from you, we think everything's great. And we know that we can do a lot better, encourage the members of the public. Thank you all for being here today, but those who will take advantage of listening to the live stream and whatever, and stay engaged through the entire process, because it's important. It's our town. Your opinions matter, and we've got it. We will take them under advisement. So please continue to be part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. My own comments are, as the process moves forward on all aspects, I can only hope that what we arrive at the provincial level stays relevant, and that the interference in the grassroots from the provincial government is kept at a minimum, so that the people in our town get to make the decisions and don't get ran over by provincial policy. It has happened recently, and we can only hope that going forward we stay relevant at the grassroots level. That's my big concern. Thank you. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there's no more committee comments, I will move on to the presentation of resolutions.
One last chance. Any committee members, any further comments?
Good.
I don't see any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Wink, that committee received report 2023-0138, statutory public meeting, section 26.3 of the Planning Act, Town of Pelham official plan review for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for review. Okay. Sorry, for
one last time. Any other comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik that committee receive the consultant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion on the consultant's reports? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you for the vote. I'll begin with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not seeing any.
Thank you for the vote. I'll begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. And that does bring us to adjournment. It is 6:55 p.m. Mr. Mayor, you may adjourn your meeting.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank councillors for the meeting tonight. We again thank the residents for showing the interest and hope you maintain the interest throughout the process. And I now gavel out the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I grab a motion to adjourn, please?
Oh, sorry. A motion to adjourn. Back up. There we go. I need a motion to adjourn. Councilor Olson, and seconded by
you.
Councilor Nesnick.
Excellent. And for the vote, Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
And yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please proceed.
There we go. All right. All right. A good meeting.
Oh, well.
A good meeting.